Hi everyone, welcome to this lesson. Let's begin by creating our level, for which we are going to bring in a few external assets. We'll be creating a simple city with buildings made of individual blocks so that we can tear them apart. Okay, so I've created a new project and I've saved my scene in the scenes folder. And what I'm going to do now is bring in some textures for the floor. So we are going to start with that. So I'm going to create a folder called textures, and I've got a couple of images that I'm going to bring in. So I've got an image for the grass, like a grass pattern, and also an image that we can use for the streets. So in here, I'm going to create a new object, where is it? Game object, create empty, which is I'm going to call environment. And inside of that, I'm going to add a plane. And we're also going to position ourselves in the origin, so our camera, and put that in the origin and make our plane a lot bigger than that. So I'm going to extend our plane to, let's say, 10 on each direction. So we've got a pretty decent sized plane here. And we are going to give this plane our grass texture here that we brought in. So I'm going to create a material for that. I'm going to create here a new material, materials folder, and this will be a new material which I'm going to call grass material. And this material is going to have as albedo our grass texture. And we are going to drag that onto our plane and rename that to ground. Now we don't want to have a little bit of tiling here, because otherwise these things look absolutely huge. If you find here the tiling part, let's do 10 as a tiling, and actually maybe even more, like 20. And that can always be adjusted. Actually, I'm going to go with like a number like 40. 40 here. Okay, so that can be adjusted later as well. And you can play here with the smoothness or the different settings. In this case, I'm just want to get a little bit less of a specular of a reflection. So I'm going to make this less smooth here. All right, cool. So we have that. And if we want to make it a bit darker, we can also pick a darker color here. I think maybe something like that will do. Let's make that more greenish. Okay. Now for the streets, I'm going to create another plane here, and I'm going to add that plane in here, and I'm going to create a material for the streets. So this is going to be a new material. I'm going to call this street material, and assign the road texture, the street texture to it, and we can give that to our this new plane here. And that new plane also can be positioned a little bit above the other one, so that we don't have this area where they are both at the same location. So this can be can have a position on Y of, let's say, 0.01. Even that will do. When it comes to collision, I'm just going to leave the collider of the ground. I'm not going to add a collider to the street, so I'm going to remove that mesh collider here, remove component. And I'm going to call this road. Now the size of the road, I want it to look really small, and I'm just going to do this by eye, by trial and error. I'm not going to set like a fixed scale and adjust everything in a realistic way. This is just a game, and what I'm going to do is basically move my camera up to a height that is that of a person, like for example 1.7, and then I'm going to make it look down a bit, and I'm just going to scale the road down until it looks like the way I want it to look, and until it looks small enough for me. So I'm not really going, it's going to be mainly by trial and error. So I'm going to select the road, and I'm going to change the scale of this road. I'm going to reduce that scale until it kind of looks like, I want to feel like I'm really like a huge monster here. So I'm going to set the scale of that 0.06. I'll leave it like so. And I'm also going to extend this road all the way to the horizon, so that will be increased here by 10. So we've got a road, and the material itself, I want it to be tiled so that it doesn't have a fixed line, it's an intermittent line. So I'm going to select street material and scroll down to tiling, and this would be, I think, a tiling on wide. Let's try. Let's type 10. Let's type 100. Let's type 150, maybe even 200, and I think that is okay. So I will leave it like so. So we've got a road there, and what we can do is we can copy that road, and we can duplicate the road. Control D, and whoops, I thought I was duplicating. Let's try it again. Control D, and then we can have like parallel streets in this way. So this is all just creating like a simple kind of city environment here. So feel free to modify it or to adapt it to in a different manner. All right, so we've got a few streets there, and I'm going to now have streets that go on the other direction. So I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to rotate it on the transform here about Y on 90 degrees, and position this in like where the player is, and duplicate that. Oops, try that again. Duplicate that and try to get one that I can see. Yep. So I want to get a bit of a grid in this central area, and you're not really gonna go anywhere further. So just got a few streets like that. Okay, cool. So we've got now a few blocks, and now we obviously want to have also buildings. So I'm going to bring in more things here. I'm going to get more models that I have here, and I've used different programs to create the models. So I will show you how I export the models from Magica Voxel. So I've got a tree here, and what I do is go to export here in the bottom and click OBJ, which is a format that Unity can handle. And then I'm going to find the corresponding folder for this particular project. And I'm going to go to assets. And it's in Unity, I'm going to create a folder here on assets called models. And so going back here, I'm going to save this in models. I'm going to call this tree model. And back in Unity, I will now be able to find the tree in here. So let's, to keep track of where the player is, actually I'm going to select the main camera, and I'm going to give it a color here of a color red, so that I can know where it is on the map. So let's see where it's at. It's not even showing here. It's too small. Okay, this is the area where we are at. This is the area that I'm interested in. I'm not gonna do stuff other besides in this area. So let's bring in a tree, and as you can see, it's huge, and we need to also drag its PNG file that comes with this export onto it. Let's try it. Let's try selecting it, and there we go. So it looks good like so. And this tree, as you can see, we have this outer object and also an inner object. And the inner object is the one that contains the model itself. So I'm going to rename the inner one to model and the other one to just tree. The model is going to be scaled down. I'm going to make this a lot smaller than that. So let's try. And the reason why it is scaled up is because one unit in Magica Voxel, usually when you export things into Unity, sometimes the units are just a bit different. So if I go here and if I added a cube, you'd see that one unit in Magica Voxel is one unity in one Unity unit. So that is why this thing is massive, because it has very few. It is very small in Magica Voxel, but it is just each one of these is exported as one unit. So I do need to scale that model down. I'm going to scale it by 10, so 0.1 here, 0.1, and I think that will do. So we want to give this a collider. So I'm going to give the outer object, the tree, I'm going to give that one a collider, a box collider, and I'm going to I need to move this collider so that it matches the model. So let me just select the inner element. So the inner element should be actually in position 0 here. and we should just be moving the outer element. So what I'll do here is give this is modify the collider manually by clicking here. So let's bring in the side view and move this collider up, and this part up as well, and make this match the sides, the correct sides of the tree. And let's bring in the other side view and fix the other side as well. So there we go. We've got a tree now with a collider, and we can now move it around, do whatever we want with it. And I actually want to give this a rigid body with gravity, so that we are able to grab that and to kick it around, or to move it around. So it's got a rigid body with gravity. Okay, so now I'll leave it up to you to decorate this. I'm going to create a prefab with this tree, just in case we make modifications to it. So I'm going to save this as prefabs, and I'm going to move my tree in here, and then I'm going to move this inside of environment, and maybe create an empty game object here called trees to place all of the trees in there. And now my tree selected, I'm going to duplicate it and have a small avenue here with trees. So I'm not going to build the whole city in the video. I'll build it offline and then show you the result. But I'm just adding just a few trees so that we can get started at least. Okay, so we've got trees now, and we also want to have buildings. Now, what about the buildings? The buildings were also created with Magica Voxel. I have already exported them into OBJ files with the corresponding PNG files. So I'm going to select all of these, and all the files that were exported, I'm going to select them except for the tree that we already brought in. And I'm going to select here the models and import this whole thing into my game. So we've got, let's start with the black box. It's just a big square here, and give it its material, give it its texture. And then what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna give this a rigid body, and I'm going to give this a collider, box collider, because that will it'll just fit in automatically with the I thought it would fit in automatically. It didn't fit in automatically. We are actually just gonna use the inner element here. So I'm not gonna use the outer element. So I'm gonna expand that, and I'm going to just move the default out here. Yes, continue. And I'm going to delete that. Just keep the outside one. Rename this to black block. And I'm gonna give this one a box collider, which now fits perfectly. And I'm going to give this a rigid body as well. And I'm going to scale this down to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. We could have done that with the tree as well, but sometimes I prefer to use the outer object. But in this case, since this is just a box, I'm going to do it like so. All right, so that is a single element, and we're going to make a prefab out of that. So you can do the same with the other buildings if you want to have like multiple color buildings in your city. And now that we have a single block, we can start building actual skyscrapers here. Okay, I'm testing this with virtual reality headset, and the reason it is important to test your things on virtual reality as early as possible, because when I'm testing now, I realize that things are still a little bit too big. Like the trees are too big, the buildings are too big. I don't have enough room scale area to walk to that building, for example. So I'm going to reduce everything by probably like 25% or a third of their current size. Okay, you just saw what the game was looking like in virtual reality, and I'm basically traveling back in time now so that we can fix the scale of a few things, because the way that we were doing it was just too big. So for the individual block prefab, the current scale now is 0.02. I've also scaled down the roads. The roads are now scaled on X on 0.02. So that is a new number for the roads. And I've also changed the grass material, and I've increased the tiling to 80. And I'm actually going to increase this to 100. And the street material, I'm also going to increase the tiling here to 300 or even 400. So that is so that we have more frequent lights. Now the trees themselves in the prefabs here for the trees, expanding on and see the tree model, I've also scaled that to 0.02. And I moved the roads so that we have a close, like a closer grid now around the player. So now we can resume where we were at, which was in the creation of the buildings. So we're going to create our first building, and then I will show you a problem that will happen with this when you are working at this size in Unity. Because Unity wasn't really made to handle small things like the physics engine. In normal 3D games, elements that have physics are usually bigger. So there are some issues sometimes. All right, so we've got our prefab here, and I was playing around with a physics material before, so I'm going to disable that. All right, so we've got our prefab here, and to create a building, all you have to do is you can just duplicate the object, and then you can use vertex select, which is when you press the letter V in your keyboard to pick the vertex you want to drag around, and you can easily position that vertex in the same position as the other vertex, so that then you can have bigger areas. So you can do that again, duplicate, and take control just V and there. And I'm going to do that again, and we can position that in here. So this allows us to quickly create the floor of a building. And now that we have that floor of a building, so I'm going to place all those elements here. Let's organize our structure a bit. So I'm going to have here a roads game object where I'm going to place all the individual rows, and we'll do that same thing for the buildings. So let's create I'm going to keep the buildings separate because they are not really, they are something that will be moving, although the trees will be moving too. Let's just place it here, okay? Environment, this will be buildings. And in here, I'm going to create an object. I'm going to call this just black building. And I'm going to move all of these elements inside of this object, and let's then duplicate this, Control D, and move the new block up here. So I can press V again, and I can move this down. I can press again Control D, duplicate, and duplicate, place it like so. So I want to show you something that will happen once we create a tall enough building. So I'm gonna go one more and press V to select the vertex and place it there. I think this might be enough for this to trigger. So what will happen is that when you press play, some of the buildings will collapse. Well, this one didn't collapse, but you can see a little bit of a crack there. And what happens is that the physics simulation is not 100% precise. So when you stack, even if you stack a bunch of generic cubes, there is a little bit of movement. So for example, if I select any of these cubes and we pay attention on the Y coordinate when I press play, there are slight changes on them, but they are very, very small. But those kind of add up, and you could have some of the buildings collapsing. One way to make that a little bit less impactful, you're still going to get the cracks, but I saw that the buildings would collapse a little bit less, was to give them a higher mass for starters. So instead of 10, we can enter, instead of 1, we can enter 10. So that might help a little bit, or even 100. That will help a little bit keep them together. So that is something we have to deal with. And also, if you go to project settings and you go to time, the default physics simulation time step is 0.02. So if that is decreased, the simulation is more precise and you get a little bit less of that, but then at the same time you also get higher CPU usage. So that is a bit of a trade-off you have to do. All right, so I think it's clear now how to generate the cities. I'm not going to do that on camera. Basically, I'll create a bit of a city on my own, a few buildings of different colors. And what I'm going to do in this lesson to finish is just add the dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs that you would have seen in the VR video are actually generated in created in Blender, which is another 3D modeling program. And I will show you how I export the models from Blender into Unity. So basically the model is here, and I make sure to put the origin at the bottom, so that then when I set y equals 0, it is positioned on floor level. Also, I apply all the transforms here, so that is all 0. And this is more important when you are using backgrounds that you want to where you want to bake the lights. You select that inverted triangle and add a UV map, but that's not really going to affect us here. Anyway, so I'm selecting my model with A, and then I go to File, Export, FBX, which is a format that Unity can work with, and then make sure to click that selected objects here, and also check that one, and then just find the corresponding folder and click Export. I've already done that. And then in Unity, in Models here, the way you bring it in is quite simple. You just drag it into Unity. So you got that giant dinosaur. And now there's only one issue. We have local coordinate selected. And as you can see, the local forward coordinate points up. And I generally like my models to be facing towards the forward coordinate, because then you can just tell it to go forward and it's just easier for us to work with. Otherwise, if you tell this to go forward, it will go up. So the way to sort that out is to place it inside of another object. So I can go and create an empty object. So I'm going to place that empty object in 0 and give it no rotation or whatsoever. So that's just an empty object there, and I'm going to place my dinosaur model inside of that empty object. Position wise 0, but we're going to leave that rotation. So if we select the parent object, as you can see, we've got the forward in the right position. The inside model doesn't have the forward in the right position, but that's okay, because we're only going to be dealing with the parent here. So we're going to close this and forget about the inner child there. Call this dinosaur, and we're going to give this a I think the size, I'm going to keep that giant size, and maybe it's just way too big. So let's reduce the inner model. So let's change the scale here to like half the size at least. And now let's go back to the parent, okay? And we will give the parent a collider. To make it easy, I'm going to choose the box collider. So let's bring in the side view and edit our collider. So click Edit Collider there. So this is the area where the dinosaur is going to be causing collisions. And it's the area where we can throw things at it as well. So bring the other side view, and something like this will do. And the top view, just to have an idea. Yeah, I think that's fine. So this is our collider for the dinosaur. We're also going to give the dinosaur a rigid body, which is going to be kinematic, because it's not going to respond to external forces. We will be controlling its transform using a script. So that's it for the dinosaur. We'll make the dinosaur a prefab as well. And we are going to position 4 dinosaurs in here. So we've got the player there in the center. We're going to have a dinosaur here. Let's press Ctrl D to duplicate. Another one here, another one here, and another one here. And we're going to make them all face towards the player and walk towards the player. I'm going to create an empty object for my dinosaurs, and move them all in there, just to keep this a little bit more organized. Okay, well, that is all for this lesson. So now the challenge for you, the open challenge for you, is to create a city. You don't need to create a whole city. It really needs to be in the area near the player, and maybe a few other things here and there, so that the dinosaurs can sort of drag around a bit of trees and rubble and other things. So that is all for this video, and I will see you on the next video with a bit of a city built around us.